Hey, how you doing?
Hello.
Um, do you prefer for me to call you Night Fox, or what's your preferred username or name on this podcast?
Night Fox. Divine Dev is more of a branding thing, so yeah,
Okay.
Night Fox is fine. Yeah, Night Fox is fine.
Or your first name if you're up for that. It depends.
I'll be Lloyd. Whatever's comfortable for you.
All right. All right. Well, would you like to give a little introduction about yourself to anyone listening?
Yeah, sure. In short, Lloyd Brooks. Call me Night Fox. I am a game dev. I would say more of an artist than anything else. Graduated from UCF with a game design degree, bachelor's. And I have been making games for a very long time. I use Unreal and a myriad of different artist software and tools and things like that.
Cool. And would you like to share the game that you've been working on, Heavenly Chronicles?
Yes, Heavenly Chronicles is my current project. It's I would say it's a passion project. I've been working on it for a long time, a long time. I got the idea for it um, shortly before I started college, and in short, it's about a the protagonist that is kind of on the fence about a lot of things. I've taken a lot of my own personal experiences and kind of injected it into the main character. I feel like us as devs kind of do that to a certain degree, and so I don't think this is any exception. And so try not to give too many spoilers, but there's the main protagonist has a lot of issues that he's dealing with, a lot of things, a lot of unknowns that he's unaware of. He is currently married. Same thing with his spouse. There's a lot of things that she doesn't know in terms of history, background, things like that. Um, he comes across a sword of sense, and one day he gets a disturbing voicemail from his spouse's number, and a mysterious person shows up in front of him, whisks him away to purgatory. Is very cryptic about a lot of things he tells him that he has to do. Tells him that his spouse is in danger, and that the fate of the world is on his shoulders, and that there's so much for him to learn. And so you go through the game playing as that main character, who, by the way, his name is Lance. And let's just say there's a one of my favorite genres in games and movies are fantasy and supernatural.
Hmm.
Um, and so I have incorporated those two genres and aspects very heavily in this game. One of my favorite shows is Supernatural, and so um, it's very um, divine in nature, right? So you have a lot of angelic things, demonic things, and stuff like that. So and I am a huge fan of plot twists,
Hmm.
and so I do plan on surprising the gamers throughout the course of playing, where you're like, okay, I didn't see that coming, or I did see that coming, but maybe not in this particular way. And so I'm a huge fan of that. One of the reasons why I got into games, I wanted to uh, kind of bring more of a theatrical aspect to games, right? Like, so everyone has played games, and I don't know too many games that don't have like cutscenes in them, right? And I would probably make the argument that for the most part, that's probably the lowest level of like a theatrical approach, injection into a game where you're playing it and then now there's this scene that you're watching, right? But I feel like there's more that could be incorporated in that. It's kind of hard to explain, but in terms of I guess kind of like stage direction, things like of that nature, right? Where like you're playing a game, and instead of maybe just having um feel like things like we like developers pass over and take for granted in terms of film aspects. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like I want to inject a little bit more of the story in the gameplay, not just the typical format. You play, cutscene, and you kind of have have that cycle going until you
Yeah.
finish the game. So
Now,
yeah.
first of all, obviously there's a strong element of narrative to your game. Is it a story-based game? Or is it what genre is it?
I would say it's action adventure, if anything. RPG action adventure.
So
So
there's fighting elements as well.
yes. So even though going against everything that I learned in school, they usually tell you not to compare your project to other projects, but
Okay.
here goes, right? So
Mhm.
it would be, if anything, I would say it would be a mashup of Devil May Cry, right? Where you're fighting mobs, you're fighting in more of a stylish type of combat, where Dante's like uh, air juggling enemies in the air and things like that. And a lot of his moves are very flashy, right? I would say the most RPG elements from like a Final Fantasy, right? Where you have skill points, magic points, things like that. Um, you'll have up to 4 other characters on the screen as you progress through the story, and you'll be able to swap between them, right? Um, and I would say God of War in the aspect of uh, being able to like Kratos when he interacts with certain enemies, he's able to do certain things with them. You know what I mean? Like uh, potentially put him in a headlock or something like that, or be able to control a giant and ride on its back or something like that. So those are the elements that I want to incorporate in the project.
Big undertaking.
Yes, 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 yes. So it's like I said, it's a passion project, and I'm so very lucky that an engine like Unreal exists, because like I've stated before, uh, I'm more of an artist than anything else. I definitely understand a lot of the foundations of programming, object oriented programming. I've taken classes in college in order to get my degree. Right, I sat in those computer science classes,
Hmm.
right, and scored pretty good in most of them. And but at the end of the day, my passion is always art,
Hmm.
and so um, it's if I could just do all of the art and then have like a button that I could just press to finish the programming, which I guess that kind of exists nowadays. So I would totally do it. But and so Unreal exists, and it definitely makes my life 1,000 times easier. Like I've always said it on my stream. I tip my hat to all programmers like yourself that sit there, and there's just walls of code, and I've been there, I've done that. Luckily, I came out the other side sane enough to know that I never want to do that again. I never. Don't get me wrong. I love watching y'all do it. It's amazing, but I can't. I can't. I am a
Oh, I
visual.
like the coding part. I would be really upset to give that part up.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And it took me a while to really realize that. I was like, well, if coders like to code, why don't they just make their lives a lot easier and just do visual scripting, because all the code is inside the nodes, and you still kind of code because you still got to hook things up, booleans to if statements and things like that. So it's still kind of programming, but I get it. I totally like it. It's as if somebody had told me, "Hey, you like to do art, why don't you just use pre-made art?" And I'd be like, yeah, but I would still like to make my own art every so often. And so I
It's not
I
just
finally, it took me
that,
a while to get that.
though. It's also that like my least favorite part is like using a mouse to like drag and drop and like click and link and like that. I have to do so much of that already that I'd rather just be like, if this, then do that. You know what I mean? Like it just seems way more intuitive for me to say do it with language than to do it with like my mouse. Like I always like misclick and like what I don't know. I just feel like I don't know, like clumsy with a mouse. Where typing, it's like I don't know. It feels very like you get into this flow state. It's not like this constant, like annoying, like this and then open this and right click and like. I mean, you can get into a flow state with that, I'm sure, but I don't know. Something about typing it out that feels more natural to me for some reason.
Don't tell anybody. I feel the same way every so often. After
Yeah.
after I'm sitting here working in Unreal and I'm moving nodes, deleting nodes, replacing nodes, and I've been doing that for upwards of 6-7 hours. Every so often I'm like, okay, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Well, I guess anything
But
if you do it long enough is gonna make you feel like that.
I'm like, look, if I have to connect this one more time, I don't care if I'm testing, and then I have to take a break and come back to it. But yeah,
Mm.
yeah, no, I totally get it. I totally get it. I totally get it. So,
But
but yeah,
I have many questions for you.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
So first of all, you mentioned you're more of an artist and you do 3D art. I know you used to work in Maya, and you mentioned recently that you're going to be switching to Blender. You're learning to become proficient with Blender. How's that going, and what made you do the switch?
Um, how's it going? It's going. I've used. Oh man, I've used Maya. Wow, since I've been using Maya since 2010. Yeah, about 2010. And you know, UCF was pretty rigid on the programs that we used while going through, um, the major and stuff like that. So, Maya was essentially the modeling program of choice by them. We had Photoshop, we had Unity was the game engine of choice until we hit about our senior year, right? So, um, and so yeah, that I've been using Maya essentially my entire dev journey, and to now switch over to Blender, which I've dabbled in Blender a bit when it first came out or whatever. Um, and the transition is still not any easier. The controls, the shortcut keys, trying to find everything in there. So it's a slow, tedious process because it's like, hey, I want to do a thing, so then I have to look at the documentation. I try to find tutorials for it, and then I take 2 or 3 steps, and then I'm like, okay, how do I do this thing? And now we start that cycle all over again. So, um, it's been challenging. The reason why I ended up switching is a few reasons actually. For the most part, Maya is a pretty destructive workflow. If you Once you really start getting into a lot of the things that you want to do in it, right? And if I always challenge anybody, hey, if you want to test this out, jump into Maya, create a cube, and usually when you do that, you have attributes that you can change to subdivide that cube, essentially initially give that cube scale, and things like that, right? And when you're done with that, delete one of the faces or whatever, and then jump back in and then try to adjust those initial attributes. 9 times out of 10, the mesh is going to break, right? And so it's a very definitive workflow, and you have to be very certain about what you're doing going through whatever the process it is, right? And
Wait,
I
wait a
find that
second.
Blender's.
I've got a
Hmm?
question about that. So the way I work is exactly like you're saying, but I know that Maya does keep like a track of your history. Like, could you not go back through the history and make the adjustment through that if the
I've
destruction?
tried that so many times, and
Yeah.
every single time the mesh breaks. Every
Mm,
single time the mesh breaks. So I could be wrong with this, right?
mhm.
But from my experience, it's as you're working, most things you have to be kind of definitive of what it you want it to be. Now, not
Yeah.
saying that obviously you couldn't have a cube and add subdivision edges to it later on. But in the terms of a non-destructive workflow, uh, Blender is pretty good. I mean, obviously there's 3ds Max, which
Mhm.
was it's pretty much the equivalent of an Autodesk 3D app. But at this point, I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to switch, I might as well go with the free program like
Mhm.
Blender that is just as good as 3ds Max, and at least for what I want to do with it, anyways. And yeah, I mean, and like I said, it's a pretty nifty program. I like it so far. Pretty straightforward in terms of you asked why did I make the switch? Well, I wanted to create a ambient occlusion, right? Not really the map, but I wanted to take the ambient occlusion and bake it down to the vertex colors, right? Because right now I'm working on foliage. I'm sorry, foliage. I always say that wrong. Foliage.
Uh-huh.
And in Maya, it seems like it's just so convoluted to do it, man. And in Blender, it's the process is a lot easier. It's I think it's what, 2 maybe 3 nodes you throw in there, and you render it out through I think it's cycles, and you bake it down to the vertex colors.
Interesting.
And so far it's been working out for me. Like I said, I know it's going to be a pretty slow process for me, switching over, on top of upgrading the project to UE5 on top of that. So
Mhm.
I got a lot going on. A lot going on.
No, there's a lot
So
of good. You make a good point. There are a lot of really great features in Blender that might be worth the effort. Hopefully, I'm sure it'll be worth the effort, or you wouldn't have even begun the process of switching over. And I'm sure in enough time you'll be just as fluent. I think once you have an idea of how to do 3D modeling, like I'm sure a lot of that is going to stick with you. Like, oh, I need to extrude here. I need to do an edge loop here. Like I'm sure all of that will translate. It's just a matter of getting used to like the interface and the hotkeys, which will just be a matter of time and practice, I'm sure. What other software do you use?
uh I love Marmoset. Marmoset is amazing. I love Marmoset because I've used Substance Painter before, and they're both definitely competitive software. But I think at this point, I've settled in to Marmoset, especially with my workflow. Um, Most things that Substance Painter does, Marmoset can do. I like Marmoset's Baker. In my opinion, I feel like it's unrivaled.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, oh yeah, it's amazing. I highly, highly, highly uh, recommend it for anybody. Like I said before, it's really easy to use. Um, what else do I use? Photoshop, right?
Mhm.
I think at this point, I don't think there's another imaging software that I probably would use. I think Photoshop is pretty cool. Um, what else do I use?
Do you
Obviously,
use
Unreal.
do you
Huh?
use do you do any sculpting first of all?
Oh, ZBrush. Yes. Oh
Oh,
man, how could I forget ZBrush? Yeah, I've been using ZBrush since 4R4, I think it is. So I've been using ZBrush since like I want to say like 2008, 2009. ZBrush is amazing. Uh, um,
what do you use
I
ZBrush for? Do you
think
make your characters from scratch in that?
I have before. I have before. I've heavily made characters on my own. I've taken pre-existing uh, characters and heavily modified them. Essentially using it as a base mesh, right? So,
Okay.
and I think it's probably going to be the same workflow, especially when it comes to things like demons and stuff like that for Purgatory. Some of them will be bipedal, so I'll take a humanoid base mesh and I'll add wings, claws, a third arm or something like that. So, and I think, in my opinion, ZBrush is amazing for that. Amazing for that. So,
How are you going to be depicting Purgatory to be?
um, wow. Well, I mean, as I stated before, being a game design grad, I believe in game docs.
And what?
So I've game documents.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. So uh, and I have an art style guide for Purgatory, and I've taken the inspiration from a lot of different places, right? So, uh, a lot of different movies represent hell and purgatory differently. So my version of purgatory will be a very fog laden place, right? So the visibility is going to be almost zero, right? So it's going to be very dark. Um, uh, you'll be fighting against these seven cardinal sins, and so each of those sins have existed obviously since the dawn of time, and they are very much fans of what humanity has created. So each of them has their own favorite time in history. So one sin loves the Roaring Twenties, right? So
Which
you'll
wait, which sin likes which era? I gotta hear this.
let's see if I can remember this now.
What?
Okay, let me see if I can remember. I have it in my docs, but
Mhm.
Wrath will be the Scandinavian, essentially Vikings,
Okay.
right? Uh,
The fits. I like
uh,
it.
Vanity will be the Roaring Twenties, so you'll have the
Okay, that's good
flappers and
too.
all of that.
That's fun.
Um, Envy, I think it's Victorian England. I believe it's Envy,
Okay, okay. I can see that.
right? I think it's that. Gluttony is the Roman Empire.
Okay.
Uh, eh, I have one for feudal Japan, and I can't remember which sin that is, to be honest
Which
with
sin are
you.
we missing? So you had wrath, gluttony,
Yes.
sloth. Which one's sloth?
Um, I can't remember which one the sloth is. I have them all down. I have them all down.
I can never remember all the seven deadly sins. There's wrath, which you mentioned is Vikings. Envy, which
Yep.
you mentioned is the Victorian.
Yep.
Um, the Roaring Twenties is greed. Did you say?
Vanity, I think it
Vanity,
is.
vanity. So
Yeah.
is there one for greed?
I have all of them, and I can't remember which
And no, there
ones.
would be
But
one for lust. Would be the only one left, I think, that we didn't cover.
yes, you know what? I think Lust is the Victorian England because I wanted to use like the Victorian mirrors and things like that. I feel like they're very decorative.
Mm.
So there's a. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to technically pull it off because, as we all know, doing any kind of mirrors in a game is almost impossible because um, it's just too expensive to do. So I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to do that tech. There might be ways that I can fake it, and maybe you don't necessarily see your reflection. Which, if that's the case, I can put whatever I want into the mirror because at that point it's just really about textures and UVs. Um, so I might end up doing something like that. But hey, if we were making games 20 years from now, maybe that tech will be a lot cheaper. But it's not. So, but yeah, no, I definitely want the Victorian era to be that one that's in. So
Well, that sounds fun. It sounds like a really fun way to organize the story and the different levels in the game.
yeah, it allows me to split Purgatory up while still keeping the overall environmental narrative essentially the same, right? So the outside of those pocket, uh, I guess, kingdoms, territories, um, Purgatory is still going to be pretty foggy, very low visibility, which means that whenever you fight enemies, you'll have to really pay attention to what you're doing because you won't be able to see everything that they are doing. I want to have interactive fog to where when you do swing weapons and things like that, the fog kind of dissipates a little bit,
Hmm.
and so that way you get temporary visibility, right? Um, So I guess I don't know, another comparison, maybe Elden Ring, Bloodborne with low visibility. So imagine the difficulties of that kind of combat. Um, so
I can imagine it,
but yeah,
the difficulties.
yeah.
How you've been working this for a while and it's a big project. How do you stay with it? I know, I've also been working on a long-term project, but it's a question that comes up a lot. Is how do you stick with it? And I'm curious for you, how do you not get distracted? How do you not do something else? How do you keep going with it and stay motivated and interested in it?
Well, that's been a journey on itself. I know when I first started, um, I had the goal of finishing it, rather quickly. I think I was like, I was gonna finish it within a year, maybe two, or by the time I graduated, essentially.
Mhm.
And life being life, kind of sometimes has its own agenda. So, and obviously I've had a kid since starting this project and everything like that, and everything that comes with that. And so eventually I had to just tell myself, um, indie devs exist for a reason, right? The majority of us are solo developers. Even the ones that aren't solo developers, we obviously don't have the same staff that a triple A studio has, right? And if a triple A studio takes upwards of, I think the average for a game development for a triple A studio is like, I think it's like 2 years or something like that, 2 3 years. And so if it takes that long for a triple A studio to make a game, right, full featured, realistic game, then who am I as a solo developer to put that amount of, I'm not going to necessarily say unrealistic, but very very high pressure on myself, right? And so at this point, I've told myself that, what, I'd rather take as long as it takes to make the game that I want than to rush it to make meet other expectations and it not be the final product that I've desired. So um but I definitely have all the tools that I've been wanting for a long time now, right? Because when I first started this, a lot of things just didn't exist, right? But now a lot of things do exist in these programs that makes my life 10 times easier, just 10 times easier. When I first started, um, uh, Unreal didn't have blueprints. It didn't have visual scripting. It was very much an IDE with its own scripting language, programming language, Unreal script, and and it was rough times for me at that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, because I mean, like I said, it's the computer languages that I took in school, right? We took C, we took Python, Java. Um, we had a couple other like off-brand languages, processing, um, and I think that was just the bulk of the programming languages that I took, right? And so, still didn't prepare me for using Unreal Script, right? And I struggled so much trying to make Heavenly Chronicles in Unreal 3, right? Well, I think UDK or whatever. Um, but once Blueprints came out and I started working with Blueprints, things became a lot easier for myself. So my in short, my advice for anybody would be, uh, know what you want out of your project. I think that's the most important thing, right? Um, and understand whatever size staff that you're working with, whether you're solo or you have a group of people working with you. Just understand that you know Rome wasn't built in a day, right? I know that's really cliche, but I think from a developer standpoint, um, I think it actually fits, right? You might be able to code a system, in a day, but you still have to apply that system to everything else within your game, and then obviously you still have
Mm.
to play test it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know any game that has ever been made from start to finish without any kind of bugs and things like that. So you're always going to have to go back and fix something. Patches exist for a reason, because even when you finish a game, somebody finds some way to break it, and so you still have to go back and patch it. So at the end of the day, you know, it's game projects are a living breathing thing, right? So it takes time to develop it.
Yeah, it does. I think we don't value patience that much these days, but it can really having patience can really allow you to do some cool things.
Yeah, I mean, like I've been in your community and I've seen shout outs to Call of the Void, and I've watched Call of the Void, I guess, evolve into Strain, I would say, right, if I'm correct on that.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really good example of just knowing what your ultimate goal for a project is, and if sometimes you have to either move left or right to achieve those, that goal, then that's fine, and you have to be fine with that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I've changed with Heavenly Chronicles. Believe it or not, Heavenly Chronicles at one point was going to be a 2D game. I was
Really?
gonna, yeah. After my journey with Unreal Script, I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this, and so I was looking for alternatives, and I came across RPG Maker, specifically RPG Maker VX Ace. I think was the exact version that I came across, and although that had programming in it, and I think it was Ruby. I think Ruby was the programming language in that, something
I
like that.
remember RPG Maker, but I don't remember the programming language. I don't even. I know it did have its own area to do some programming, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it was Ruby on Rails, something like that. I don't know. But for the most part, I think it was Ruby. I want to say that. And so I found scripts to do everything I wanted to in it. I found scripts for party control, to have, 4 or 5 party members. I found different scripts for an inventory. I pretty much had a script for everything. I just had to do the art, right? And at one point, I was just like, I really want my game to be 3D. And it was just so funny that I was already kind of playing around with Unreal 4 through the subscription that they had at the time. And then it became free, and I was like, you know what? Let me start really getting into Unreal 4, and I haven't turned back since. So,
Hmm. Now I have a question for you. So you mentioned going to game dev school. I know you served time in the military. Did that happen before or after school? And can you tell me a little bit about it? I'm really curious what that was like and
yeah,
how you went from that to game dev.
before, well, I've always been an artist my entire life, but I've had art classes in school. I've had my artwork in exhibits in my hometown and things like that. And so I ended up getting a partial scholarship when I graduated, and for whatever ludicrous reasons, I decided to go to the military at the age of 19. And
Wow.
so, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that was a journey in itself. And they enticed me with like a lot of things. They were going to pay for my school and things like that. And so I
Mhm.
had this whole plan laid out. And like I said earlier, sometimes life has a different alternative for you. And
Mhm.
so my plan was to go into the military and go to school. And I, for some odd reason, felt that that's all I was going to do while I was in the military. And apparently, that's not all you do when you're in the military.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, okay. So I guess I'm not going to be able to go to school while I'm in the military the way that I wanted to. I wanted to be like a full time student, and then I essentially, whenever I had time to be a soldier, I was going to be a soldier, and apparently that wasn't going to work for them. So,
Seems
um,
convenient, I think, doesn't it?
yeah, I guess I had it reversed. I had it reversed. So,
Darn. Too bad.
um, so after I got out and everything like that, I qualified for certain benefits and things like that, and one of them was to have go back to school for free,
Okay.
and I could have went for anything I wanted to, and I decided I was like, you know what, I want to go make games. I wanted to do this my entire life essentially. That's really always been the goal, to make games. And at one point I was looking at retirement, and so I said, well, you know what, I was going to go into the game industry, but I think since I'm looking at retirement now, why don't I just be an indie dev? That way I get to make the game that I want, um, and I can control my own destiny. So a lot of reasons, and I want to be able to. I think representation in video games are so important, and so
Mhm.
whenever any game that I make, I really, really, really want to make sure that um, it gets the representation that it needs. I don't want anything forced, so I definitely wanted to make sure that, if the story that I'm telling calls for, a woman to be the main character, then that's who's going to be the main character. If it necessarily calls for, you know a minority to be the main character, I definitely want that to be right. And so um that's one of the main reasons I wanted to start making games. So
Yeah, no, I hear that. It's such a such an immersive medium, and there's so much potential for it. And it's nice to see all different types of people making games in all different ways, whether it is with a big company or small teams or solo, or because there's so many different. You get such a different result based on how it's made and who's making it. So it is really nice to see different types of people making the games, because then you get like more variety, which is, who doesn't want that? More variety in games to play.
correct, yeah. Well, I mean, what is it? I had an art history class, and the teacher that I had she really emphasized storytelling,
Mhm.
and she was like, well, humans have been telling stories since the dawn of time, and you could see it, throughout a lot of the relics and artifacts that we have. Everything from like the hieroglyphics with the Egyptians to everything else, right? And I think video games aren't exempted from that, right? It's just another way we could tell stories. It's an
Mhm.
interactive story if you think about it.
Mhm.
Most video games are an interactive story. Everything is as simple as Super Mario Brothers, right? Mario, just a dude trying to save a princess while jumping on mushrooms and turtles, right? And so, um, and just like you said, I think different people making different games can tell stories in a vastly different way, and I think uh, I'd probably make the argument that I don't think we take advantage of that enough in terms of developers as a whole. I don't think we take advantage of that. I would probably make the argument that indie devs take advantage of it far more than AAA studios, but as a whole, an entire industry, I don't think we take advantage of it enough. I think we can definitely put more stories out there that are just so um, different, right? Long lasting. Like we all can sit and think of a game that we've played that has stuck with us, right? We always talk about it every so often, right? And
Mhm.
it'd be a shame if I didn't mention it at least one time in this interview. But
Gotta mention
um,
it.
yeah, I mean, Star Ocean.
Mhm.
It's probably my second favorite game, but
Second,
it's. I know I love Final Fantasy VIII. I would be ashamed if I didn't put Final Fantasy VIII first.
I really like
But
Final Fantasy VIII as well, actually. So that's fair. That's a fair contender.
right. And but it Star Ocean 2, the second story, is, I would say, is the game that I have had the most fun playing
Mhm.
ever. I don't think I've ever played another game that I've had that much fun. Everything from the story to all the mechanics. I don't think I've ever seen a game with that many mechanics in it either,
I
right? You
know
can recruit,
they
right?
blew it out of the water with that one because and it's funny, we're just talking about having interactivity with storytelling, and I think that's one of the big things with Star Ocean 2 that I think both of us probably like this based on our conversations, but I know I definitely did. Um, it feels like you actually have agency. Like you go and you explore some random part of the game map and you get like a new character to join that you had no idea was going to be there. It feels like you were really rewarded for exploration. And then there's so much different branching. Like there's, I think it was like marketed as 86 different endings, and like that just made the game feel like all of the decisions you made, you weren't really sure what would affect your relationship with other characters or impacts on the story. It kind of left it vague, but you had a lot of decision making to make, and even things like who you picked as partners in battle and who you
Yep,
um, chose for different things. Like you weren't sure what mattered, so it felt like everything did matter, and
right.
that made it like really really it made it really feel like personal almost, or like you get attached to it because of it.
Yep,
It was cool.
yep, yep. And the replayability factor on it is through the roof. I mean, it's one of those games that, I think there's 12 characters you can end up. Well, not, you can't get all of them because you get one, you can't get the other.
I think I
But
want to say there's
I,
16, but maybe 12 as well.
16, I could be wrong. Yeah, so it 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 makes you have to play the game multiple times in order to be able to use all the characters, right? And then on top of that, um, there's a crafting system, multiple crafting systems, right?
Mhm.
You can create paintings, you can create music. There's a pickpocketing system in there, uh,
That one was
and
really cool too, because all the NPCs had an item that was like relevant to their personality, which was so cute. Like the kids would have jam or something. Like
yep, yep.
so
It's
creative.
so amazing, and I really really want to play it. But if it wasn't for the fact that I'm working on this project now, I know that I wouldn't enjoy playing it because I wouldn't be able to play it as much as I want. I would want to play that game for like hours straight, and I can't
Yeah,
afford to do that right now, unfortunately.
yeah,
So who knows? Hey, when I finish this project, take a couple months off before I start working on Heavenly Chronicles 2, and maybe I just play nothing but Star Ocean 2 as a little reward to myself for getting through
that sounds
this
nice.
first project here.
I wanted to ask you. We kind of switched topics, but what did you do in the military? How long were you in there for?
I was in there for 3 years. I drove trucks. Well,
Mhm.
I know that's a simplification, but I drove. My official title was transportation specialist. So, uh, pretty much most things with wheels I drove.
Was it
So,
very like rigorous training and stuff like that? Like was it, what sometimes it's depicted like you get up early, you have very strict things you need to do. Was it as severe as it's depicted?
yeah, obviously Hollywood is going to, glorify it a little bit more for obviously engagement or whatever, but not too far off from it. Typical day, depending on what your job is, but most people get up about 5 o'clock in the morning to get ready to make it to formation for 6 o'clock. uh you do your whole little thing at 6, and then you start PT, physical training, right? And that usually lasts for about an hour and a half. Then you're dismissed. You go, back home, shower, get ready, eat breakfast, and you usually report back to wherever it is for 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, usually there is a formation, whether it's platoon. Usually you don't have a company, but Uh, Sometimes there might be a company formation. Then, for the most part, your platoon sergeant tells you what you're doing that day, right? Either your platoon sergeant is going to address the whole platoon, or your platoon sergeant will address the platoon, but then also address your squad leaders, and then if there's individual things that everybody needs to do, and then your squad leader will tell everybody in the squad, hey, look, this is what we're doing for the day. So, quick example would be my platoon sergeant would probably tell us, like, hey, today our platoon is in charge of maintenance on all of the deuce and a half trucks.
Okay.
So I've already talked to your platoon leaders, and each squad. I'm sorry, your squad leaders. Each squad will have a certain number of trucks, and so then my squad leader will come and tell me, hey, um, Specialist Brooks, um, I want you to work on this truck. This truck here needs the hub bearings changed, and it needs oil changed. And so at that point, I'll get with a mechanic. Me and the mechanic will go through the truck, and I'll be responsible for a truck or two trucks for maybe the entire day if I can get both of them done in time. And then I report back to my squad leader. Squad leader reports back to my platoon leader. And for the most part, typical day. I mean, obviously we break for lunch. Same thing, you know. And then we come back after lunch, finish up the day. Typical day usually ends around 4 or 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Not guaranteed, obviously. I've had days where I had to break for dinner and come back to work, right? And obviously, like with anything, things come up, right? I've been in the military where a weapon has gone missing on a base. Now the entire base is on lockdown, and
Oh
now
boy.
I'm at the motor pool, and I'm not leaving until about 11 o'clock until that weapon is found. So
Wow.
just like any other job, you have things that come up and stuff like that. So
So that's really interesting that you have that background. Do you find that you've taken any of the sort of, um, the very strict routine or any other elements from it into your life after you've gone from that into game development?
a lot of it, I
Yeah.
mean, which is why, yeah, a lot of it. The I guess the determination to get the mission done, right?
Mhm.
Um, I Which is why I've pretty much kind of just fixated on game development for a very long time now, right? That's really all I do, every day, unless there's other stuff. I mean, I've coached football throughout this entire game, development journey. I've coached football. I've like in the middle of raising my son as a single father. Um, I've had have a personal life of sorts, but for the most part, I mean, I obviously stream, but for the most part, that's it, right? And obviously by choice. I love making games. I love game development. I love the project that I'm currently working on, and so uh, having that background in the military, knowing that, hey, look, these are my objectives, and this is what I'm going to do, right? And anything outside of those objectives are just things that depending on what it is, I just can't afford to deviate from, right? So there's a lot of things I could have done, a lot of things that I've had opportunities to do that I'm like, no, I think I'm just gonna continue to make games. So
Hmm.
um yeah, but I don't know. I mean, it's like I said, sometimes, I mean, it could be a little detrimental too, like I don't know. I don't know how much you might want me to touch on this, but like the personal life aspect,
Hmm.
right? So I don't know how many devs out there might be able to relate, but it's kind of hard to have a personal life as a solo developer, right?
Hmm.
Especially when you're start talking about like dating and stuff like that. Um, because being a solo developer means that you have to put in at least an 8 hours, like any other job, right? And I usually say at least because as a solo developer, depending on your project, 8 hours may not be enough if you're trying to release a project within a decent amount of time, right?
Hmm.
Because as a solo developer, you're usually the artist, and it depends on what type of art we're talking about. If you're doing something like a 2D project, then okay, cool, you're the artist. But now if you're talking about a 3D project, well, you're the texture artist, but now you also have to be the 3D artist. Then you have to be the programmer, right? You have to be the environmental artist, right? And everything else, right? And so you're wearing several hats, and so sometimes 8 hours may not be enough. But obviously, if you're dating, there's another person that's like, well, I'm not a game developer, so when are we going to do stuff, right? So, and it
It does consume a
and
lot of your time.
yes,
Yeah.
and so having that rigid military background that I have, that it's sometimes it could be a detrimental thing because I've had times, situations in my life where I'm like, look, this is what I'm doing, and I can't really deviate from that. So just and it's being a developer is not an easy job. It's not an easy life either. So I'm pretty sure there are some people out there that can definitely sympathize with me on that.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you are, doing something that's your passion and you spend so much of your time on it, it's hard to find um it's hard to find a good balance with somebody who's not on that same page, because most people don't spend the majority of their time on one task, which, and a lot of people also look at work as work, whereas I think when you go into game development, especially as an indie, it's not work. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. It doesn't feel like work, but when people are saying like it's my job, it's work, I do it because I have to, and I don't want to think about it or do extra if I don't have to. It's very different when you're doing something that you actually love doing, because it's also hard to pull yourself away from it. Like, you want to be doing that. It's hard to find that balance, and make it a healthy balance too.
I agree. I totally agree. I totally agree. Yeah, it's like and then for me personally, it's like a like a painter, right? Whenever you feel that inspiration, you have to kind of just go with it. At least for me, there's times where the 8 hours I might be putting in is fine and dandy, but then depends on what the situation might be. I might get an inspiration and then decide to work like 16 hours, which, like I said, detrimental. But and I find myself like, and that's when I usually get my best work done, where it's not even in the 8 hours that I normally put in, but sometimes I might have a breakthrough in something that I've been trying to accomplish within those extra 4 to 6 hours that I'm putting in. And it's like I said, it's one of those things that what is the saying that they have about like the sad clown or something like that,
I
where
don't know.
the clown is really making everybody laugh, but inside the clown's kind of sad, or whatever the case might be. i think
Oh,
i think i think I think
it's a sad description.
no, 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 no. Wait a minute. Wait. Okay, but I mean, in terms of I think especially indie devs, right? The solo devs. I think we're one of those situations where the final product uh, doesn't remotely speak of the process that had to go through for that, right?
Mm,
Think about all of the amazing solo, well, not even solo, but just indie projects that have been made within the last 10 years, man, like iconic ones at that, right?
mhm.
And everyone is like, oh man, the project's amazing, the game is fun to play, it's this that it's revolutionary. But how many times have we ever just really stopped to think, what did all those people actually had to go through to bring that product to a realization, right? How many 14-hour days may they have put in, or how many personal experiences did any of those people had to go through while doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about that a lot. And I think that's one of the things that drives me. It's like, hey, look, I've made a lot of sacrifices to even be able to do what I'm doing right now. To sacrifices going to school and getting that education, to be able to put game docs together and things like that, and going through the military to be able to get those benefits to go to school and all that. So I really need to just focus, kind of have a little bit of tunnel vision, which I don't think is bad from time to time, and just uh, finish work on that project. A lot of times, even my stream, right? There's a lot of things that I would love to do with my stream, but every time I make that mental list, I'm like, yeah, but I just want to make the game. So I never ever put in anything I want to implement into my streams, any like rewards or redemptions or things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
and I can just really extrapolate that into even my personal life. I'm like, there's so many things I want to do, but I just really want to make my game. And I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's when you talk about all that goes into making a game that you don't really see it in the final game. But I think when people are like, "Oh, indie games have a lot of soul to them," I think that's part of it. Is all that goes into the process of making it. You can kind of feel it in the game. You can kind of feel like a lot went into
yeah,
it. A lot of, lot of what's the term I'm looking for? I don't know. A lot of passion went into it though. Blood, sweat, and tears, and passion. A lot of emotion went into it.
yeah. And man, I think it's I don't know. I just feel like it's a little underappreciated. Um, I don't know. I mean, what like games like Super Meat Boy, Braid, uh, Jumpman. Just I don't know. There's just so many games, and I'm like, wow. I wonder what was the personal journeys of these devs, right? I mean, obviously you have things like GDC talks and things like that, where they kind of go over, I guess, the more technical journeys of the games. But I'm like, yeah, but I know there were some struggles there,
Well, the
and
ones you mentioned have the documentary about them, so that was a really great depiction. I mean, I guess we'd have to ask them directly if that was a great depiction of what it was like to make it, but you got to see a little bit of the behind the scenes with some of
okay,
these documentaries. So those ones, at least, we have a little bit of the behind the scenes. But you're right, there's so many more that we don't have, and we don't know
yeah,
what went into it. So it's hard to know. It's hard to tell.
yeah. Unfortunately, we always end up hearing about the work conditions, which I guess would be part of the journeys too as well. But
Even in
you know what I
AAA,
mean.
it's the work condition problem. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. And that's one of the other things too. And you know, uh I would love for this title here to be successful, and hopefully maybe the sequel to it, or the two sequels to it, to be successful, and maybe within time have enough success to where I could employ some people. And that's one of the things that a lot of my professors were always telling us, hey, look, go out into the world, try to get into this industry and change the narrative in it, right? Especially the work narrative in it. Try to change it for the better, right? Hope a lot of them were like, hey, I hope by the time you all get where you need to be, that crunch is no longer a thing, right? The pay in this industry is hopefully a lot better, and hopefully I can be at least one of those people that are trying to change that in the future. So hopefully 5 years from now you'll be interviewing me again, and I can tell you that, hey, I have a team of people now, and we're working on some other supernatural s game, which I have a whole universe that I would love to maybe expand Heavenly Chronicles in, and maybe have Heavenly Chronicles be the new Final Fantasy, where I have 15 titles out later on.
That wouldn't that be nice? But yeah, I'm sure that I know there's companies out there who, whether there's big, medium, or small, that are fighting against the crunch times and some of these bad conditions. And you don't really hear about the companies who do a great job. You don't all like you. When does that make headlines? Game studio did a good job and nobody was treated poorly. Like, doesn't really make
Correct,
headlines. Right?
correct,
We only hear the
correct.
bad
That's true.
stuff. Unfortunately, there's a good handful of that, but I think there is also there's a lot of great companies out there as well. And yeah, hopefully, as you said, you'll be one of them down the road, and you'll have your own studio and be able to make these games with a lot less of those blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? Should be, at least, anyways, is to move the industry forward. I mean, I would love to well, I can't wait till Strain is released and see how that changes things, because I feel like when games come out and they're successful, I think the industry has a tendency to kind of look at what was successful and build on that, right? I mean, think about it. That's why we ended up with the QTE craze like we did, right? I can't remember the first game that did it, but uh, at one point every game had QTEs in it, right? And
Sure.
so it's that's how the industry is, right? And so I definitely want to be a part of that, to where people will look back and look at my project and see the good things that came from it, and be able to build on that and push the industry, or even just the genre, forward, right? So
Those are some big goals, and I appreciate them. I do. I'll be honest with you. I'm just like, I hope a few people like the game. I hope I like the game. That's my goal. I hope I make something I'm proud of. If pushing the industry forward, absolutely a good, you know, definitely a good goal to have. But that's
yeah, I
the
mean that's
out of the way.
obviously the ultimate goal, right? I mean
Yeah.
the ultimate goal. But I mean, obviously my immediate goal is to finish the project, make sure it's something that I'm proud of. I definitely want everybody else to be proud of it too as well, and enjoy it. But I think the my immediate goal is to finish my project,
Hmm.
and have it be exactly what I want it to be. Um, and I think if those things are at least good, I'm willing to accept whatever results anybody else gives it, right? So, heaven forbid if I release it and everybody's like, it was an okay game. Obviously, I'm not going to be happy with that, but I think I would be a lot more pleased the fact that the vision that I had for it was completed, right? Because I've made several games when I was in college, and so completing a project isn't anything new for me or anything like that. But I think at this point, it's more important for me to complete something that I'm proud of. You released Don't Notice Me, right?
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure at this point you have a baseline, and you want to obviously supersede that baseline.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And so yeah, same thing for me. I mean, at this point, it's just I want to be able to have everybody experience the story of Heavenly Chronicles. Obviously, there's still two more games to make after this, so you won't be able to experience the complete story, but you'll be able to at least start that journey. And so I think it's I really really think it's a great story. I have it 80% of the way fleshed out across all three games, but and I'm really excited for people to be able to see that. So
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to playing it. I can't wait to see
appreciate
it.
it,
And I can't
appreciate
wait
it.
to
Thank
see
you.
all the different settings of all the different sins. It's such a fun theme, the seven deadly sins.
Yeah, I mean it's being able to incorporate that. I came up with that idea early on, and I'm like, what if each of the sins kind of was attached to a certain part of human history, and what if they kind of took on those personas of that time period, right? So the sin for the Roaring Twenties may uh, uh, present themselves as a bipedal flapper, but then when you really start to fight them at some point, obviously there's boss phases. Every game has boss phases nowadays, but maybe there's a phase where they shift, change, or morph or whatever into the true form, and now you have to fight this like Elden Ring-esque boss, right? And maybe all of them have that kind of boss phase shift, and having players kind of experience that, I think would be kind of cool, right? I think it's just another level of immersion maybe that could come into play with that, being able to see that happen in feudal Japan or Victorian England or ancient Egypt. That's another time period that's in purgatory, and being able to paint that narrative that purgatory is a place that exists kind of outside of time, at least my version of purgatory, and so that you can be able to really go to these places, and they all still exist within purgatory. um, and so, like I said before, for anyone else who has watched Supernatural, then you can kind of see, I guess, some of my inspiration from that show, because
Okay,
that
cool.
show didn't necessarily do the same thing, but in terms of storytelling and world building, I think Supernatural is a pretty amazing show for that kind of example of their world
Cool.
building and things like that. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. It's been nice chatting with you. How can people
appreciate
find
it.
your work, your stream, your game?
Wow. I'm on Twitch most of the time when I'm not upgrading my project to a whole other version of the engine. You can find me on twitch.tv, Divine Dev Studios. Um, right now, that would probably be the best place because I usually have links to my other uh, social media platforms,
On
because
Twitch?
my
Mhm.
other ones are, yeah. Unfortunately, I didn't really sync all of them like most people would, so they're all kind of different versions.
It's hard to get
Some
those usernames.
yeah. So I think I have like a link card or something like that. So, but all that is on my Twitch page. So that's probably the simplest way to find everything else. I have an art station and things like that too. So,
Cool.
but you can find me. I usually stream usually 7 days a week. I usually stream. So, just depends on what I have going on. So,
Sounds good.
if not, hey, you can always find me in the land of Lux Stream.
Well, thank you again, and I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you later.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bye bye.